So when I was a kid, there were certain children's books at my grandparents' house that I always read, that I always looked forward to picking up as soon as I got to their house on the weekends, as I went so often. They were classics that a lot of you and perhaps even your children have read. The Saggy Baggy Elephant, Ping the Duck. One of my favorites was called Harry the Dirty Dog. It was a story about a mischievous pooch who absolutely hated taking baths. One day when Harry heard the water running in the tub and he knew what was coming, he buried his scrub brush in the backyard and he set out, left his backyard and went out across the city searching for adventure. And adventure he found, and through those adventures he got dirtier and dirtier. Harry had a great time. Played with other dogs, he explored the city, the whole 9 yards, but by the time he got finished, he was a dirty, muddy mess. Finally, he got lonely and he started missing his family a lot. He was tired and he was hungry and he just wanted to go home. So slowly, block by block, he made his way through the streets of the city until finally he came back to his own backyard where he lived. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever wanted nothing else in the world more than simply to be home? There is nothing like that feeling in the entire world. It's almost like an achiness, except it's an achiness that is mixed with fear, because on some level you're afraid that the one thing that you want, your heart's desire, which is to get home, is something that you will never be able to achieve. All the way from the time of Homer's Odyssey, that is a theme that literature and films have been playing on over and over again. It is one of those deepest feelings that we have. Homesickness is no joke. That feeling that you have when you're away from what you hold most dear is downright painful. But what about when it gets even more complicated? What about when you get home and nobody knows who you are, or you aren't welcome? That's actually what happened to Harry the Dirty Dog. After he went through all of his adventures and got dirtier and dirtier, he became unrecognizable. He was so covered with filth. When he tried to greet his family, he was so dirty that nobody recognized him. He had gotten so covered up with grit and grime and mud when he was out on his adventures that he didn't even look like himself. He knew where he wanted to be, but where he wanted to be was somewhere that he wasn't welcome anymore. The scripture passage that we are covering today is in the series, the ongoing series we're doing this summer called Tell Me the Stories of Jesus. And this particular story of Jesus is one of my absolute favorites. It takes place during the Last Supper, on the very night that Jesus was betrayed into the hands of the high priest in Jerusalem and ultimately into the hands of Pontius Pilate. The place that we're drawing it from is John chapter 13. And one of the things that is so interesting about the way that John tells the story of the Last Supper is that it is so different from the way that all of the other gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tell it. Those other three are the ones that have Jesus gathered around the table, taking the bread and taking the wine, showing them to the disciples and saying, "This is my body, this is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me." That story that we know so well and that we retell each time we celebrate Holy Communion. But not John. John doesn't have any of that. He says that they were having supper together, but he doesn't make mention of any of the things that the other Gospels talk about. In fact, John has his own unique way of telling the story. And the way that he begins it is this. He says, "Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." It is such a striking way to begin that story. Everything that Jesus has been doing in his ministry has been designed to show the love that he bears for the disciples from the Father. And now he is about to show them how far that love goes, both right here in what he is about to do and in the cross that he is preparing to bear for them very shortly afterwards. It is all about his redeeming love. And so it says, in the middle of the supper, he gets up while they are eating and he takes off his outer garments. He pours water into a basin and he gets down on his hands and knees and he begins to wash the disciples' feet. We witness this scene and we think, well, isn't that strange? What an odd thing for Jesus to be doing in the middle of dinner. Why would Jesus choose that act right then and right there to demonstrate his love? To get at the answer to that question, we have to do our best to look at this story not through 21st century eyes, but rather through the first century eyes that the disciples were looking at it play out through. The fact is that in our own day and age, we don't do a lot of washing of people's feet when they come to our house to join us for dinner. But back in the first century, that was a regular act of hospitality that happened all the time. You see, people wore sandals. And the roads, by and large, were not paved. And so people's feet got dirty. I mean, they got really dirty. When you showed up at someone's house, you would be greeted at the door. And getting your feet washed was a basic act of hospitality on the way into the home. It was a way of the host saying, I welcome you and I honor you. As a matter of fact, we can go even further. Having your feet washed was a way of saying, you belong here. I accept you here in my home with my family. So if you look at it that way, if Jesus is the host of this meal, which he is, then welcoming the disciples by having their feet washed makes all the sense in the world. But actually, here's what doesn't make sense. It was never the place of the host himself. It was never the place of the master of the house to do the foot washing. Foot washing is dirty because feet are dirty. Feet are considered to be a dishonorable part of the body, in fact. And so it would have been the task of the servants or the slaves of the house to actually engage in the act of washing the feet. You would never have the host washing the feet himself, and you would certainly never have him doing it in the middle of the dinner. That little wrinkle, or perhaps that great big wrinkle in the story, is what explains the reaction that Peter had when Jesus got around to him. Peter looked down at Jesus on his hands and knees, almost completely disrobed there with the basin of water and his dirty feet sticking out there. And he says, you're going to wash my feet? No, Lord, you'll never do that. I will never allow you to wash my feet. Jesus is turning every social convention, every expectation about hospitality and about meal sharing and about the washing of feet on its head. He's making Peter feel uncomfortable. He's making all of them feel uncomfortable. Jesus is not just the host of the meal. He is their rabbi. He is their teacher. He is their master. He is their Lord. He isn't a servant or a slave. It's not his place in their minds to engage in a menial or a disgusting act like the washing of their feet. And it's especially not his place to do it in the middle of the meal, in the middle of supper as they were enjoying it together. You know, one of the biggest problems that we have when it comes to our relationship with God is that we are so determined to approach God on our terms. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt like you want to go to God in prayer, or you want to feel closer to God? You want to have a deeper communion with God, but the way that you want to do it is the way that you want to do it, not as God comes to you himself. Faith in Jesus, in fact, is great so long as it only requires what we are ready to give. I love you, Jesus, we say, but just don't ask me to let go of this thing. Or, I want to follow you, Jesus, but just don't ask me to follow you there. Don't ask me to leave this one specific thing behind. Don't make me let go of this thing that it would be inconvenient to let go of, or this thing that I am addicted to, or this thing that I don't want you to take from me, that I don't want you to require of me. You can tell me to go anywhere, Jesus, just don't ask me to go there. That kind of faith is a trap for us. It is a snare. It is a faith of convenience, because it is only a faith or a trust in Jesus when it is and where it is convenient for us. Even the ones who were closest to Jesus could be guilty of that kind of a faith. Peter shows it in the way that he reacted to what Jesus was saying that night. Peter was Jesus' right-hand man. He was the one that Jesus turned to more often than anybody else. I mean, from Peter's perspective, they're building a great ministry together. And that ministry feels like it is kind of coming to a culmination at this point. They have traveled all the way down from the Galilee. They are entering Jerusalem on the cusp of the Passover. Who knows what's going to happen next? The crowds are clearly kind of coming to Jesus. They are leaning into the message that he's bringing. For all Peter knows, Jesus could be getting ready to overthrow the Roman government. For all Peter knows, Jesus could be ready to become the most prominent prophet since the prophet Elijah 800 years before. And here, on the cusp of the Passover, when everything feels like it's building to a crescendo, when Jesus feels like he is coming into the fullness of his power, he does what? He strips down, he gets down on his hands and knees, and he takes the attitude of a slave and starts washing feet. You see, Peter wanted the Jesus that Peter wanted. He makes that clear by what he says. He wants Jesus to meet his expectations. And he isn't shy about saying so. So Jesus says to him what, frankly, Jesus says to all of us. And it is important that we hear it with unstopped ears. What Jesus says is this: if I do not wash you, you have no share in me. It's that simple. You don't get Jesus on your terms. You have to take him on his terms, or take him not at all. You don't get to cut deals. You get the real Jesus, or you don't get anything. It says that having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And part of that loving was showing them what real love looks like. Real love is willing to debase itself in order to accomplish its task. It's willing to embrace humility in order to show what God's compassion and care really look like. Real love will fall to its knees and wash feet. Or it will fall down and accept the lash of the whip. Or it will fall down and accept the cruelty of the crown of thorns. Ultimately, real love will accept the pounding of the nails and the hard wood of the cross. If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. You have to let me show you what real love looks like. And as I wash the dirt from your feet with water, so too will I wash the sin from your hearts with my blood. What he was doing that night foreshadowed what he would do on the morrow, when the washing would be on still another level. And what are we? Well, we're like Harry. We're like Harry the dirty dog. We creep around the backyard of the master's house. We want to go inside, but we want to do it on our terms. We've buried the scrub brush, and we want to be able to do things our way. But the problem is that doing things our way leaves us so dirty as to be unrecognizable. In order for Harry to be Harry, he had to accept the scrub brush and the family that would lovingly use it to wash every speck of grit and grime from his coat. He had to give up his way of doing things so that he could be part of the family that was always meant for him. Friends, it is time to turn our lives over to Jesus. Pay attention to the signs of the times. Pay attention to what is going on in our world. Pay attention to your own life. Look around. It is time to turn your life over to Jesus, to learn the depth of his compassion, to experience the cleansing of your sin. It only seems painful because it means that you will have to let go of some of those things that you have been holding on to with a death grip for so long. But the truth is that once you let them go, you will discover that they were only holding you back all along. At the end of his book, The Quest of the Historical Jesus, Albert Schweitzer wrote this. He said, "He comes to us as one unknown. As of old by the lakeside, he came to those men who knew him not. He speaks to us the same word, 'Follow me,' and to those who obey him, whether they be wise or simple, he will reveal himself in the toils, in the conflicts, and the sufferings which they shall pass through in his fellowship. And as an ineffable mystery, they shall learn in their own experience who he is." Accept him. Follow him. Love him. He is drawing you to himself, and through him to your Father in heaven. Amen.